Hashtag how car aerodynamics affects performance. AutoVision Daily. Hashtag look at 200 miles per hour. Aerodynamic drag is so powerful that it would take more than 1,500 horsepower just to push a poorly shaped vehicle through the air, yet a well-designed car achieves the same speed with less than half that power. That single fact tells you everything about why aerodynamics is not just an engineering detail. It is the invisible force that either makes or breaks every performance vehicle on the planet. And most people driving today have absolutely no idea how deeply it affects their car. Hashtag tease. In the next 10 minutes, you are going to discover exactly how aerodynamics shapes speed, fuel efficiency, handling stability, and even tire wear. We will walk through the science, the history, and the real-world numbers. And we will get to the one insight that surprises almost every car enthusiast, something that contradicts the most common assumption about spoilers, wings, and downforce. By the end of this video, you will never look at a car's body shape the same way again. Let's get into it. Hashtag background. To understand why aerodynamics matters so much, you have to go back to the early days of the automobile. When cars first appeared in the late 1800s, engineers were focused entirely on making engines more powerful and drivetrains more reliable. Nobody was thinking about airflow. Why would they? Speeds were low, roads were rough, and just getting the machine to move at all was the challenge. But as speeds climbed past 50, then 60, then 80 miles per hour in the early 20th century, engineers began noticing something troubling. Cars were becoming increasingly difficult to control at higher speeds. They would lift at the front. They would wander unpredictably. And fuel consumption would skyrocket. The culprit was air, or more precisely, the car's relationship with air. Early racing engineers were the first to take aerodynamics seriously. By the 1930s, teams were experimenting with smoother, more enclosed body shapes. The Chrysler Airflow, launched in 1934, was among the first production cars to be designed with wind tunnel testing. It was a commercial disappointment because consumers found it strange looking, but it pointed toward a future that was completely inevitable. By the 1960s and 1970s, Formula One teams were making the most radical aerodynamic discoveries in automotive history. The introduction of wings and diffusers in racing fundamentally changed how engineers thought about the relationship between a car and the air around it. This knowledge slowly filtered down from motorsport into the production vehicles you see on the road today. Hashtag main content. So what exactly happens when a car moves through air? At its core, aerodynamics is about two competing forces, drag and downforce. Understanding both is essential to understanding performance. Drag is the resistance that air creates against a moving object. It is measured using a coefficient of drag, commonly called CD. A perfectly smooth sphere has a CD of about 0.47. A typical brick-shaped object sits around 2.0. A modern production sedan typically achieves a CD somewhere between 0.25 and 0.35. The Mercedes EQS, one of the most aerodynamically optimized production cars ever built, achieves a remarkable CD of just 0.20, making it more slippery than almost anything else on public roads. Here is why that number matters so much. Aerodynamic drag does not scale linearly with speed. It scales with the square of velocity. That means when you double your speed, drag quadruples. When you triple your speed, drag increases ninefold. This is the reason why your fuel economy drops so dramatically at highway speeds compared to city driving. At 30 miles per hour, drag is relatively minor. At 70 miles per hour, it is the dominant force your engine is fighting against. Every fraction of a point reduction in CD translates directly into range, speed, and efficiency. But here is what nobody talks about when it comes to drag: the shape of the rear of the car is just as critical as the front. Most people assume the nose of the vehicle does all the work cutting through air. In reality, the wake that forms behind a vehicle as air struggles to reattach after passing the body creates a low-pressure zone called a separation wake. That vacuum is actively pulling the car backward. A long, tapering tail, like you see on teardrop-shaped vehicles, allows air to reattach smoothly, dramatically reducing this effect. This is why the Tesla Model 3's sloped rear is not just a style choice. It is a deliberate aerodynamic decision. Now let's talk about downforce, because this is where aerodynamics gets genuinely fascinating and where the biggest misconceptions live. Downforce is exactly what it sounds like: aerodynamic force pressing the car toward the road surface. More downforce means more grip. More grip means faster cornering speeds. This is why Formula One cars can corner at forces exceeding 5 g. A modern F1 car generates so much downforce that, theoretically, at speeds above 100 miles per hour, it could drive upside down on a tunnel ceiling. The aerodynamic grip exceeds the car's own weight. Production performance cars exploit this principle in more subtle but equally important ways. Spoilers add downforce to the rear axle, preventing lift that would otherwise make the car feel light and unstable. Front splitters push the nose down, keeping the front wheels loaded and responsive to steering inputs. Diffusers under the car accelerate airflow beneath the vehicle, creating a low-pressure zone that literally sucks the car toward the tarmac. The Porsche 911 GT3 RS generates over 400 kilograms of downforce at its top speed. The Bugatti Chiron's rear wing deploys automatically to provide massive rear stability. The McLaren Senna was designed so aggressively around downforce that McLaren's engineers described it as a road-legal racing car, generating 800 kilograms of downforce at 155 miles per hour. But here is the critical trade-off that every performance engineer wrestles with: downforce and drag are almost always in direct opposition. Generating downforce requires surfaces angled against airflow, and those same angled surfaces increase drag. Getting more grip typically means sacrificing top speed. This is why race cars optimized for a tight, twisty circuit like Monaco run enormous wings, while cars set up for a high-speed oval like Le Mans run much flatter, lower drag configurations. The entire engineering conversation in aerodynamics is about finding the right balance for the right application. ## Deep Dive Active Aerodynamics represents the next evolution of this challenge, and it is reshaping what is possible in production vehicles right now. Instead of fixing a car's aerodynamic configuration at the factory, active systems adjust in real time based on speed, cornering forces, and driver inputs. The Porsche Taycan uses an adaptive rear spoiler that deploys at high speeds and retracts when drag reduction is more valuable at cruising speeds. The Ferrari SF90 Stradale manages 6 different aerodynamic configurations through its active flaps and underbody systems. The Lamborghini Huracan Technica uses rear-wheel steering combined with aerodynamic management to rotate the car in corners with precision that was previously only possible in race cars. What makes active aerodynamics so powerful is that it solves the drag versus downforce trade-off dynamically. The car can have low drag on the straight and high downforce through the corner automatically, within fractions of a second. This is the aerodynamic equivalent of having 2 completely different cars available simultaneously. ## Analysis. The real-world implications of aerodynamics extend far beyond the racetrack, and this is where the conversation becomes relevant for every single driver. For electric vehicles, aerodynamics is directly tied to range, arguably the most commercially important metric in the EV market. Reducing drag by just 10% on an electric vehicle can extend its range by approximately 5 to 6% under highway conditions. At a time when consumers are anxious about range anxiety, that is not a minor engineering footnote. That is a competitive advantage worth hundreds of millions of dollars in development investment. For conventional vehicles, better aerodynamics means measurably better fuel economy at exactly the speeds where most highway driving occurs. A car with a CD of 0.28 versus 0.35 will consume roughly 8 to 10% less fuel at 70 miles per hour, real savings that compound over thousands of miles annually.